Every single project, it doesn't matter how big or small, sails into a sea of uncertainty. Some of those uncertainties are just minor waves, no big deal. But others are project sinking icebergs. So today, we're going to break down project risk management, the art and science of navigating all that uncertainty to not just survive, but actually thrive.
Okay, to really get this, let's start with a story you think you know. We all know the Titanic hit an iceberg, right? But if you look at it through the lens of project management, the iceberg wasn't the real problem. The real problem was a total catastrophic failure to manage risk. You see, the sinking of the Titanic wasn't just one bad thing happening. It was a whole chain reaction of failures. Standard procedures? They just weren't followed. There were clear iceberg warnings coming in from other ships that somehow never made it to the captain. And to top it all off, they were going way too fast for the icy conditions. Then you have the unknown risks, the stuff they hadn't even thought about, like the ship's steel becoming super brittle in that freezing water. It was quite literally a perfect storm of unmanaged risks. And that story, the Titanic story, teaches us a really fundamental lesson. Managing risk isn't just another task on your to-do list. It's a mindset. It's about building this culture of awareness and preparation long before you're ever cast off. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start by learning from that unsinkable failure. Then we'll get into how to chart for uncertainty, how to spot those icebergs up ahead, how to properly figure out just how big a threat they are, and finally, how to choose your course to navigate around them. So, how do we avoid our own modern-day icebergs? Well, it all starts before the project even gets going, with a really foundational document. You've got to create the nautical charts for your project's journey, and that's your risk management plan. Now, here's the thing you have to understand about the risk management plan. It doesn't actually list the specific risks. Not yet. Instead, think of it as the rule book for your entire project. It defines how you're going to handle risk, it sets the budget for it, it outlines the methods you're going to use, it defines who's responsible for what. It basically builds the entire framework for every single risk-related decision you'll make later on. Okay, so with our rulebook in place, the next crucial step is to start actively looking for those icebergs. I mean, it's simple, right? You can't manage a risk you don't even know exists. And there are some really powerful techniques for this. Brainstorming is fantastic for just getting a ton of ideas out on the table with the whole team. For trickier problems where you need expert opinions without anyone influencing anyone else, you can use something called the Delphi technique. A SWOT analysis is great for taking a step back and looking at the big picture, your project's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And root cause analysis, well, that's for when you really need to dig deep, past the symptoms to find what's truly driving the risk. And it doesn't matter which technique you use to find these risks, the next step is always the same. You have to document them. This is where the risk register comes in. Just think of it as your project's official logbook for every single thing that could go wrong or right. Every risk you identify gets its own entry, detailing what it is, what might trigger it, and how you're thinking of responding. It becomes your single source of truth for all project uncertainties. Okay, so your risk register is now filled with dozens of potential icebergs. Now what? You can't possibly deal with all of them with the same level of intensity. So the next step is analysis. It's about separating the little threats from the ones that could actually sink the ship. And this is usually a two-step process. First, we start with qualitative analysis. It's a quick, kind of subjective assessment to prioritize your risks based on how likely they are and how big their impact would be. This just helps you figure out which risks need more of your attention. And for those really high-priority ones, you then move on to quantitative analysis. This is objective. It's numeric. Here, you're trying to put a real dollar amount or a specific time delay on the impact of that risk. A classic tool for that qualitative part is the probability/impact matrix. It's incredibly simple, but so effective. You literally just plot each risk from your register based on how likely it is to happen versus how bad the damage would be. The takeaway is simple. Anything that lands in that top right corner, high probability, high impact, that's where your focus needs to go, right now. Now for a little taste of the quantitative side of things. Let's say you've got a choice to make. You have two potential projects. Each one has a different potential payoff and a different chance of success. How on earth do you decide? Well, a technique called expected monetary value, or EMV, can really help take the gut feeling out of the decision. Let's break it down. For Project A, we just multiply that potential profit of $300,000 by its 20% chance of success. That gives it an EMV of $60,000. For project B, we multiply its $60,000 profit by its 70% chance of success, and its EMV is $42,000. So based purely on the numbers, project A is actually the better bet, even though it's way less likely to succeed. See? EMV helps you make data-driven decisions when you're facing uncertainty.
So, once you've identified and analyzed the threats, it is finally time to take the helm and actually steer the ship. This is where you decide on your specific strategies for how you're going to respond to each of your high-priority risks. When you're dealing with threats, the risks that have a negative impact, you generally have 4 primary courses of action you can take.
First, you can choose avoidance, which basically means changing your plan to completely eliminate the threat. Or you could opt for mitigation, where you take steps to make the risk less likely or less impactful if it does happen. With transference, you shift the consequences to someone else, like buying insurance. And finally, there's acceptance. Sometimes you just have to acknowledge a risk exists and decide you'll deal with it only if it happens.
But here's something people forget all the time. Risk is not always a bad word. Uncertainty can create some absolutely incredible opportunities. A new technology might pop up, or maybe a competitor stumbles. A great project manager doesn't just play defense. They are actively on the lookout for these positive risks.
And for these opportunities, you have response strategies too. You can exploit it. Do everything in your power to make sure that good thing happens. You might share it, maybe partnering up with someone who's in a better position to capture its full value, creating a win-win. Or you could enhance it. Take steps to boost the probability or the positive impact of the opportunity, turning what could have been a small win into a major victory.
So really, the big takeaway here is that project risk management is fundamentally about control. It is about being proactive instead of reactive. It's what transforms you from being a passive passenger just sitting there hoping for the best into the captain who is actively charting a course to get through any storm and reach the destination. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. In your work, maybe even in your life, what's the biggest potential threat or hidden opportunity that you haven't really planned for? And after watching this, what is the very first concrete step you can take to start addressing it?